I moved to Willow Creek for the peace and quiet. A cul-de-sac lined with freshly painted houses, flower beds straight out of a landscaping magazine, and retirees who waved at you like they'd been cast in a feel-good insurance commercial. It was the kind of neighborhood where people spent more time pruning their lawns than actually living their lives. I should have known it was too perfect. It all started with the mailbox, a simple, unassuming swap. The old one was rusted, leaning forward, like a drunk at last call. So I picked out a sleek black metal one with my house number in crisp white print, modern, functional. That's when she emerged. Meredith Beckwith. Middle-aged, bob-cut, forever dressed like she was headed to a charity luncheon. She was the self-appointed queen of the Homeowners Association, an enforcer of arbitrary rules that no sane person would care about. Her eyes locked onto my new mailbox like I'd defaced a national monument. "Excuse me," she called, power walking across my lawn before I could escape inside. "This isn't HOA approved." I blinked. "It's a mailbox." "It's the wrong mailbox," she said, folding her arms. "Page 17, Section C of the HOA guidelines clearly states that all mailboxes must match the approved community aesthetic. White with a decorative post." I looked around. Every house had the same flimsy white plastic mailbox that had clearly been chosen by someone with a vendetta against individuality. "I'm not replacing it," I said. "It's a mailbox, not a billboard." Her lips pressed into a tight line. "You'll be receiving a violation notice." And that was how it began. The first fine was $50, then $100, then $250. Each came with a smugly worded letter from the HOA citing vague infractions and reminding me of my civic duty to preserve the community's integrity. I might have just caved, just to make it stop, until I caught Meredith measuring the grass height in my front yard with a ruler. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't dealing with an HOA president. I was dealing with a full-blown dictator. Meredith operated like a suburban warlord, micromanaging shrub placement, mailbox colors, and the shade of beige people were allowed to paint their houses. The worst part? The other residents feared her. They obeyed her like cowed villagers, nodding along as she handed out absurd rules. Trash cans must be pulled in by 6 a.m. Halloween decorations had to be seasonally appropriate and pre-approved. Garden gnomes? Contraband. I refused to bow. The fines escalated. The violations stacked up. I started getting letters about my unauthorized use of a portable grill, my backyard barbecue, my failure to maintain a cohesive holiday aesthetic. I'd put up colored lights instead of white ones, and the absolute best, an official warning for excessively enthusiastic vehicle placement. I parked in my driveway. That's when she cracked. One afternoon, I came outside to find Meredith taking photos of my car like a crime scene investigator. She spotted me and smirked. "That vehicle is in violation." I sighed. "What now?" "Your car is improperly parked," she announced. "HOA guidelines require that vehicles must be inside the garage or parked in an aesthetically pleasing manner." I stared at her. "Aesthetically pleasing? What does that even mean?" She smirked. "You'll be receiving a citation." That's when I knew she wasn't just enforcing rules. She was targeting me, and it didn't stop there. A week later, I woke up to find a bright orange sticker slapped across my windshield. "Tow notice, violation of HOA regulations." I stormed outside just in time to see Meredith standing beside a tow truck driver, clipboard in hand, grinning like the Grinch. "Good morning," she chirped. "I've had to make an executive decision. Non-compliant vehicles are subject to immediate removal." "Are you kidding me?" I snapped. "You're having my car towed because you don't like how it looks?" Meredith actually smiled like she was savoring a fine wine. Rules are rules. And that was when I saw it. The moment the tow truck driver's face paled. The way he stepped back, eyes scanning the car, as if he'd just realized he was handling something radioactive. And then he muttered, "Ma'am, we got a problem." Meredith turned sharply, her self-satisfied smirk faltering just a bit. "What do you mean, a problem?" The tow truck driver was staring at the windshield like it had grown fangs. His fingers twitched toward his radio. This ain't just some car." I folded my arms, watching as his face drained of color. "You want to explain that, buddy?" The driver didn't answer me. Instead, he turned to Meredith, shifting uncomfortably. "Lady, I don't know who you think you're messing with, but this is an unmarked police vehicle." Silence. Delicious, heavy silence. Meredith blinked. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "Excuse me?" "Yeah," the driver continued, now looking at the tow truck as if it had personally betrayed him. "This ain't some civilian sedan. This is law enforcement property. You try towing this thing, you're going to have a whole mess of problems. Federal problems." I leaned casually against the hood of my car, watching the realization settle over her like an incoming storm. Meredith stiffened. "That's ridiculous. He's obviously lying." The tow truck driver whipped his head toward me. "Sir, please tell me you're not a cop." I let the pause hang in the air, long enough for Meredith to start sweating. Then I smiled. "Nope, not a cop." Meredith exhaled, her triumph returning. "See, nothing to worry about." "But," I continued, enjoying this way too much, "it doesn't have to be my car for it to be an unmarked police vehicle, does it?" The color drained from her face again, because now she was catching up. I pulled out my phone, flicked through a few emails, and turned the screen toward them. "This car was loaned to me by my brother. You know, the guy who works for the State Bureau of Investigation?" I made a vague gesture. "It's part of an ongoing operation, something about tracking fraudulent financial transactions." I raised an eyebrow. "Ever heard of those?" The tow truck driver looked like he was going to be sick. "Oh, hell no. I'm not touching this thing." Wait just a minute," Meredith snapped, her composure slipping. "That's absurd. I checked the plates myself." I shrugged. "Probably registered under some official department. Government vehicles don't exactly advertise." She whirled toward the driver. "You can still tow it, right?" The guy physically recoiled. "Are you out of your damn mind? If I tow a police vehicle, unmarked or not, I'm going to have badges up my ass before I can even get it off the ground." He threw up his hands. "I am not going to federal prison over your little HOA power trip." Meredith's face twisted into something truly spectacular. "This is nonsense. He's lying." I smiled. "You sure you want to gamble on that?" She stared at me, weighing the risk. She knew I wasn't a cop. But what if I was telling the truth? The tow truck driver didn't give her time to decide. He was already climbing back into his truck, shaking his head. "I don't get paid enough for this crap. You call me again? I ain't answering." The engine roared to life, and with a final glance at my car, he peeled out of there like he'd just escaped a hostage situation, and then it was just me and Meredith. Her jaw was clenched so tight I was genuinely concerned her teeth might shatter. "This isn't over," she seethed. "You think you've won, but I will not be made a fool of." "Meredith," I said, barely containing my grin, "you don't need me to do that. You're doing just fine on your own." I turned to walk back inside, leaving her standing there, fists clenched, fuming. I'd expected her to retaliate, but I wasn't, expecting how far she'd go. 2 days later, a letter from the HOA arrived in my mailbox, but this one wasn't like the others. This one was serious. It was a lawsuit. Meredith was suing me. The claim? Persistent and intentional disregard for community standards and willful disruption of HOA governance. She was accusing me of deliberate non-compliance with HOA regulations, filing false reports, because apparently my car being unmarked police property was an elaborate lie, and, my personal favorite, creating a hostile living environment through intimidation and deception. I laughed. Out loud. She was really trying this. Then I noticed something at the bottom of the legal paperwork. She was demanding that the HOA force me to sell my home. Oh, she was playing hardball. For the first time, I felt an actual chill creep up my spine. This wasn't just her flexing her authority. She was trying to destroy me. I had a decision to make. I could fight this in court. Expensive, time-consuming, but winnable. Or I could end it. Because here's the thing about people like Meredith. They're too confident. They think they own the rules, that they can bend them however they like. But they always have skeletons. And I was going to find hers. So I did what any rational, level-headed homeowner would do when their HOA president starts going full-blown tyrant. I started digging HOA records, financial transactions, anything I could find. And then, late one night, buried beneath a sea of community fees, I found something. Something big. Something that was going to end her. Meredith had been so busy scrutinizing the neighborhood, policing mailbox colors and grass heights, that she must have thought nobody was watching her. But I was, and what I found was gold. Buried in the HOA's financial records, hidden under vague expense reports and reallocated budget lines, was a pattern of payments that made no sense. Thousands of dollars funneled into community improvements that didn't exist. HOA funds used for contractor services with no associated invoices. And then, the cherry on top, a series of personal purchases marked as administrative costs, a spa retreat in Arizona, a first-class flight to New York, a $2,300 designer handbag, paid. For with HOA money, Meredith wasn't just a tyrant, she was a thief, and I was going to expose her in the most public, humiliating way possible. The annual HOA meeting was set for that Sunday. Usually these things were snooze fests, just a handful of people nodding along while Meredith patted herself on the back for all her hard work. Not this time. This time, I made sure everyone showed up. A few anonymous tips to my neighbors, a little hint that there were some interesting financial discrepancies they might want to hear about, and suddenly the community center was packed. Arrived early, sat front and center, and waited. Meredith strutted in like she owned the place, clipboard in hand, blissfully unaware that her reign was about to end. She launched into her usual spiel, preserving property values, maintaining community standards, but she barely made it 5 minutes before I raised my hand. "Quick question, Meredith," I said. "Could you clarify what exactly administrative costs cover?" Her eyes narrowed. "The necessary expenses required to keep our community functioning, of course," I smiled. "That's interesting, because I was going through last year's HOA expenses, and I noticed a few unusual charges." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I pulled out printed copies, big, bolded numbers, highlighting every single shady purchase she'd made with HOA funds. Down in $500 to a luxury spa in Scottsdale, $3,200 for executive accommodations in New York, and oh, my personal favorite, a $2,300 handbag, paid for with our HOA dues. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, people turning to each other, faces twisted in shock and rage. Meredith's smug expression shattered. "That is completely false," she snapped, voice rising an octave. "These are fabricated. Where did you even get those documents?" "From the HOA's own records, which, by the way, are legally required to be available to all homeowners." I turned to the crowd. "Turns out our dear HOA president has been using our money to fund her personal vacations." Someone in the back shouted, "Are you kidding me? We pay $400 a month for this crap, and she's spending it on spa days?" Meredith's eyes darted around, looking for an escape. This is a misunderstanding. Those were business-related expenses." I didn't even need to say anything. The outrage in the room was taking on a life of its own. I had to fight her for 6 months to get my fence approved, and she's out here buying designer bags? She fined me for having my trash can out an hour late, and she's stealing our dues? The crowd turned on her so fast it was beautiful. Some HOA board, who had been her obedient little lapdogs up until now, suddenly found their spines. One of them, an older guy named Hank, stood up. "This is serious. If these expenses were unauthorized, that's embezzlement. And it's a crime." Meredith's face turned the color of expired cottage cheese. You weren't what? Paying attention while you stole from us?" People were shouting now. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Hank adjusted his glasses, looking absolutely disgusted. I motioned to remove Meredith. "From the HOA presidency, effective immediately." A wave of hands shot up. "Seconded! Thirded! Throw her out!" Meredith's entire kingdom crumbled in real time. It took less than 5 minutes to officially strip her of her position. Someone called for a financial audit. Someone else mentioned pressing charges. Meredith, shaking, tried to gather her papers like she could somehow salvage this. She turned to me, eyes burning with hatred. You You set me up. I grinned. No, Meredith, you did this to yourself. And with that, she grabbed her purse, shoved past the furious crowd, and fled. It was over. And the best part? The police were waiting for her in the parking lot. Turns out, when you get caught embezzling community funds, the county takes a real interest in your finances. And when I anonymously forwarded those records to the authorities, well, let's just say her handbag collection wasn't going to do her much good in county jail. By the time the dust settled, Willow Creek was a changed neighborhood. The HOA, completely restructured. The absurd rules, gutted. The stupid mailbox. Regulation, gone. And Meredith? Well, let's just say she wouldn't be attending any HOA meetings anytime soon. The best part? A few weeks later, I got a letter from the new HOA board. No fines, no violations. Just a simple note. We owe you a beer. I smiled, grabbed my keys, and walked out to my perfectly parked car. No orange stickers, no passive-aggressive notes. And, for the first time since I moved here, Willow Creek finally felt like home.